Hello everyone. We are continuing our discussion in the second part of the week 4 lecture. It is about the project management and in the context how the project gonna be delivered. The key document we as continuation of our week 3 discussion we of the project management. We talked about the document business case to justify why we need the project to go ahead, and we also discuss about the project charter or the project brief for the project initiation, a document to prepare to answer the WH questions when the project has to be to kick off, and who will be involved, what exactly we want to achieve. Now we're looking into the scope of the project, and the discussion is about, if you look into, for example, the body of knowledge from the Association of Project Management APM body of knowledge book, we find out the statement that the scope management is basically the process whereby the output, outcome, and benefit of the projects need to be identified. They need to be defined and controlled at the same time. So we need to see what exactly we mean by the project scope and how the scope can be managed. So what is scope management? We know that the project scope management is basically the process that helps in determining and documenting a list of all the project goals, a set of objectives, the identified key and major and minor tasks, all deliverables, deadlines, and budget as part of the planning process. So that shows that the idea of the project scope management basically to plan the scope to be in place, collect the necessary requirement for the project. That is quite important for the planning phase. Defining scope, that exactly what are the set objective to be achieved. So scope is the term used in the management of projects that refers to the totality or the overall of the output or the outcomes, or rather in simple terms the benefit that can be achieved or can be what is really required to produce this benefit or realize the end project benefit. Then again, creating the or decomposing the whole work, breaking down in different work packages, validating the scope in monitoring and control part of the or phase of the project, and then controlling the overall scope is the different key further elements or steps within the project scope management. So simply in project management, scope is defined is the defined feature and functions of the product or the scope of work that is needed or required to finish a project. Scope involves getting information required to start a project and the feature the product would have that would meet its stakeholders' need and expectations, rather stakeholder requirements to be fulfilled. So we have number of issues and challenges or constrained within the scope when we do project management, the project scope management. The key challenges or limitation or constraint, the very simple one, we call it iron triangle, the fundamental concept with three or triple constraint that is shown in the iron triangle. The as we discussed last week, scope, and then the time constraint, and of course the cost, the budgeting. So other than some three, we sometimes have quality and other key constraint to maintain and set, and call it quadruple rather than triple constraint. And that is shown in this graphical illustration, that quality is quite in the center of the triangle, where scope, time, and cost are the primary or fundamental constraint. So constraints basically anything or something that limits or restrict the project team or the project manager or all the other stakeholders to control that limitations or restrict someone actions or behavior or any activity to be performed or any deliverables to be achieved. So this restrictions or limitation is basically is the constraint. It can be time pressure, or we are out of budget, for example, or it is not properly estimated. So project constraints are limiting the factors for the project team that can impact on the quality, because if you trade off with the time or cost, quality may be suffered, as well as the delivery of the project and the overall project success is again some of the key important elements to be taken in consideration. Some people, they do believe that there are many constraints in the project, up to 15, 19, but the that also include, for example, constraint with the resources, the methodology itself, and the customer meeting their need and expectation and making customer satisfied to realize the end benefit. So they're going to be constrained with the risk or with the benefit. Other than the quadruple four elements, we also have the end benefit realization going to be a constraint, or customer or end users or client satisfaction. So every project, for example, has to manage the fundamental four constraint or quadruple constraint, which includes the scope, schedule, timing, cost, budgeting, and quality. However, the success of the project depends on the skills and knowledge of the project manager or the project team to take into consideration all these constraints and develop the plan and process to keep them in balance within the scope of the project. So we are trying to have the project scope quite clear and crystal and specific, so the set objective or already been defined, and there is no kind of doubts. So the project scope management refers to the set of processes that ensure a project scope which is defined and mapped accordingly. However, the scope management technique allow project manager, project team, or the different managers as a different team leaders and the supervisors to allocate just the right amount of work and resources as necessary to complete a particular deliverable or within particular project successfully. Project scope management is primarily concerned with controlling what is and what is not part of the project scope. So that's very important to avoid the project scope creep. So we don't want to do things which is not required or keep changing things. So it should be clearly defined within the scope what is and what is not part of the project. So checking to ensure that the project is completing needed work. That is how we can get from the work decomposition. Saying no to additional work, not in the project charter, is not mentioned, or in the brief. That is very important in the scope document. And then preventing extra work. That's going to be gold plating. So we have to avoid any further constraint with the time and budget or compromise on quality. So we need to ensure that what the scope include the work that has to be completed as per the specification. So we need to know how we manage scope, because we don't want the project suffer from scope creep, which is never-ending project. So project scope management refers to the total amount of work that must be done in order to deliver a project, or the services or resources allocation or result of the outcome from the project with specified functions and features should be defined. It also includes everything that must go into a project, as well as what defines the project success. So without a comprehensive project scope or the project scope management plan in place, there is a good chance that the project team, whatever they are doing, the work that is unnecessary, lead the project at hand, or even sometime be wasting time thinking about what they should do in sequence order, or doing next one after the other or side by side. So it is just like a map to have a clear architectural design or a blueprint where you can see how different activities can be in the sequential order to be performed, or within the time schedule and budget. So we can see in this table that how we manage scope. So we can see there are these important steps, 6 steps with 5 important elements. So we need to plan the scope, and then of course there are the 5 activities we have to perform in planning the scope management. We need to collect the requirements, define the scope, and then create the work breakdown structure, validate the scope, and then control. However, when you are doing this, performing these processes in the project scope management, we can see as a project team for planning, requirement to collect and define and create the WBS is all the part of the planning phase. So planning is quite the paramount for the success of the project. And then during monitoring and control phase of the project, we need to validate the scope, that everything is on track, as these are promised as per the expectation of the client to realize the benefit. Not just monitor, but we also need to control the scope if anything is detract and that needs to be bring back to the track, and keep controlling and monitoring it. So we also get the document as key deliverables. So key deliverables can be achieved from the requirement collection. During planning phase, we get a document, we call it requirement document, and then from the defining scope we get the statement, we call it scope statement, and then we get the, from work breakdown structure creation, we get the dictionary. This work breakdown structure dictionary basically has all the definitions for any terms or jargons that's not easily maybe the knowledge or understanding for a layman or any person can understand if they want to find out if there is any abbreviation or kind of term which is not clear. So we have the WBS dictionary. Acceptance and deliverables, and the validate, when we validate the scope, that is the document, and change request can be one of the document needs to be created and maintained for controlling the scope. So we need to know this. This is very, very important, because if the project is doing which is not mentioned in the scope, so that's going to be a project which is going to be never ending. They will be keep changing things, and the change request is always taken, incorporated, and the project will be then expanding or extending with its time, as well as it will be going over budget with overtiming, and that will be something lead the project toward even disaster. So we need to avoid project creep. If the change need to be controlled, that is more important to negotiate and can take the project in control, and that needs the skills and the capability of the project team rather than the project manager to be good in control of the project management. So when we go to each step, how this is important for project scope management. So the first we're going to collect the requirements. When we are collecting the requirements, this is a graphical illustration which helps us to understand that the input is basically we have a project charter or project brief, we have a register for stakeholders, and we know who is who, and then we use the tools and technique. This is going to be different techniques applied for collecting the requirement. We need to know from different stakeholders what is expected, what is required. We can use interviews, surveys, questionnaires, prototype models, and then we get the documents as the outcome for the requirement collections, and we have a plan for requirement management, and we have traceability metrics. So these are the output coming from using the tools and technique while getting input document as charter and the register for stakeholder management. So the next step after collection, when we get all the requirements collected, we go to define now the scope. When we are defining the scope, we are basically trying to know, because scope refers to the combined objective and requirement needed to complete a project. We know that the scope definition of how to define is basically the term is often used in project management by giving the project clear idea to managers or team to estimate cost and time requirement to finish the project within time, within budget, within scope. However, when we define scope, we need to take the project charter, as well as we need to know the document which is coming from the collect requirement. So we know the document requirement is there, and the process asset. So that is all the necessary resources to be available for the project delivery. So we use expert judgment, product analysis, alternative identification, and facilitated workshop as tools and technique. And what we get in the end, we get the scope statement, and we also get the project document updated. So that is very important when we define the scope at this stage of the project scope management, which help us to further continue creating the work breakdown structure. So when we're creating work breakdown structure, we decompose the project. So the decomposition is the more important tool or a more important technique to break the overall project from complexity into simplicity. So we have the scope statement now from the previous activity. We have a requirement document from the earlier phase of the project scope management, and we have all the organization process asset. We decompose the project, and what we get out of it, we get WBS, the structure of the work breakdown, and dictionary of the work breakdown structure. We get the baseline for the scope, the estimated time, estimated budget, and then we get the documents updated, which is going to help us to verify scope, because this is all the planning, the baseline, how much time is required for each activity to perform or to complete, and how much budget is required to spend. So we are getting now WBS with the baseline for the scope, which help us to verify scope during monitoring and control when the project is executed. So when we execute the project, we can verify now that the project is on track. So we do a number of time inspection or involve different inspectorates, and that is an important technique to apply to ensure that the plan of the project, we get the deliverable which is accepted to get the benefit as estimated. And if there is any change request, we create the documents as the outcome, and we also upgrade the document of the project. So from the verification of the scope, we go for monitoring and control during execution, and that is where, when we have a control scope, which is basically the process of monitoring the status of the project and product scope, and again managing changes to the project baseline. So the key benefit of this process is that it allows the scope baseline to be maintained throughout the project, or coming very narrow to what actually we are doing and what was estimated according to the baseline. So that's going to be quite a comparative analysis to ensure that the project is not derailed or detracked. So we can see in this graphical illustration, we have the project management plan as a that is our master plan. That is the key document for project planning. And then we are executing the project as it is planned according to the baseline. So the work performance indicators, the information we have to make sure that the key KPIs, the performance, that we are within budget, we are within time, within scope. And then the requirement documents we have already as an input, a helpful document, and we can have the traceability metrics requirement document in our organization process asset. We use this as an input resources. We apply variance analysis as a tool or as a technique, and we get the performance measure or KPI indicators that ensure that a project is on track and this is not derailed. And we have the upgraded version of the organization process asset, the document for any change requested, if it is incorporated or it is not accepted. Project management plan is updated, and the overall project document is updated. And that is the last and final, you can say, step within the project scope management. So this was all very interesting. When we get this discussion, we're going to continue to see that how we decompose the project. So we basically work breakdown structure has been created within the scope. So the foundation of the project, when we are doing decomposing, so that we need the planning and control is based on WBS. So whatever is the work project is that is decomposed in small chunk of work. So we need to identify all work to be performed. If it is not in the work based structure, it does not need to be done. So anything which is out from the WBS, it means is out of scope of the project. So graphical illustration or pictorial presence of the or presentation of the work is basically WBS, which shows in a structure of the graphic or pictorial form. WBS, because it helped to force the project team to think through all the level of the project decomposition from top to bottom, and then when we're going bottom up, that is again help us to calculate the best estimation for time and budget to be utilized. If a task is not in the WBS, then it is not part of the project, as it is should not be part of the project scope. So we can see this how the graphical illustration, the project structure, we look for the WBS, work breakdown structure. In some projects, yes, we used PBS rather than WBS, that's product breakdown structure. If the work is or the project is being decomposed, not as it going to be delivered, or what are the different elements of the product. So for example, in this example here, you can see if you want a new warehouse, so we need to decompose the work in a design phase. That is the first important work to be done as a key deliverable. Then the construction need after design. When you do architectural design, we need to construct. So the construction will be the key important part of the project, and then the commissioning, handing over to the end user. So there are quite three important deliverables, and each one is going to be further decomposed. So for example, 1, 2, and 3 are numeric codes for the three deliverables, and each one will be further decomposed. For example, design 1.1 is the structure, and then 1.2 is the architectural design. So structure design, what material, for example, we are using, architectural, how it will look like, the layout. So we further code it 1.1 to be further decomposed with a steel package or concrete package. So we have 1.1, 1.1.2, for example. So this is it can be numeric or alphabetical coding for each work, the small package that we are doing to complete all work packages, and then we calculate from bottom up how much time and cost is needed to be allocated to each activity to perform. I hope this makes sense to you, but yes, we're gonna have a discussion in our workshop to further elaborate if this need more your clear understanding regarding the work breakdown structure for the project scope management. However, the work breakdown structure is basically WBS start with major product deliverables or phases. We decompose each one as it was shown in the previous slide to decompose to making, let's say, or constructing a warehouse. So decomposition is breaking down the deliverables or key milestones into more manageable parts. Not all branches need the same level of decomposition. It depends what is what. Again, decompose into work packages, but don't break work down too much. A realistic unit of work should be used. We need to be more realistic with using a dictionary to explain all the WBS components, so there's no confusion and doubts. So WBS basically is input to most of the planning phases or processes. So specifically, WBS is input to the following key processes in the project management. For example, estimating cost, budget for the total expenditure, controlling the scope, that is more important, and that needs WBS to be available to get the scope control. Again, we need WBS for activity definition, and again, plan purchasing, procurement, and acquisition. Continue your discussion. You are, for example, if you are in a team and you are given a task, so we're looking in your assignment 1 very similarly that you are doing a project. For example, you are involved and you have to do a recommendation for the project business case or the project scope management. So you need to work in a team and giving consultation to the university for new website that support the SID or student information desk team, and provide you have to provide an interactive access to the SID services. So if this is the project justification, so we have the mandate. So your task will be within your group, you have to gather a list of the stakeholders for this project. You create a list of the is a mock requirement and develop a project scope statement out of it. So using the output from the previous task on the new SID website, create a WBS for the project. Be prepared to discuss, or maybe we are not doing one-to-one or face-to-face discussion in the campus, but you can share your thoughts as you are presenting in a group, just to ensure that you understand how we create where we get the justification for project to have a business case, how we create the for example the project charter or brief, and then how we develop project scope statement or project scope document for the project scope management. Please also continue your reading on the core textbook chapters and the recommended books. I hope you will be taking care of yourself and be safe. We will have our discussion to elaborate further in the workshop.